We've been told that mammograms are an integral part in detecting breast cancer. But a recent 25-year Canadian study involving nearly 90,000 women is calling into question whether those mammograms are, in fact, saving lives. And joining us now with more, in Newton, Massachusetts, Dr. Daniel Kopans. He's professor in the Department of Radiology at Harvard Medical School and senior radiologist for breast imaging at Massachusetts General Hospital. And with us here in studio, Dr. Anthony Miller, lead author of the study in question and professor emeritus at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. And Dr. Miller, it's good to have you here. Dr. Kopans on the line from just outside Boston. Thank you both for joining us. Dr. Miller, I want to start with you because one of the most widely reported statistics in your study is that fully 22% of the mammogram-detected invasive cancers you have found were overdiagnosed. And I want to start by understanding what exactly that means.
What it means is that these cancers, under the microscope, look like a cancer, but they don't behave like a cancer. They have reached a certain stage in development, but they're not going to progress anymore. They would never have presented in a woman's lifetime, and they do not cause death from breast cancer.
So in some respects, they're false positives, if you like?
Well, false positives are usually directed to those lesions which are found on mammograms or other screening studies and are found not to be cancer. So it's not quite the same as false positives.
But the information that you've discovered suggests that whatever invasive procedures one might normally have to undertake to deal with this cancer probably ought not to be undertaken. Is that a fair conclusion?
Well, it turns out if they're overdiagnosed, they would have been unnecessary. But the problem at the moment, and this requires a great deal more research, is that we cannot determine under the microscope or by other tests which of these cancers are. And although we have calculated that 50% of the cancers found by mammography in our study, which could not be felt by the breast examiners, were overdiagnosed, we don't know which ones they were.
Okay, let's a couple more questions before we get Dr. Kopans in, because I think we need still some basic information about what you've done. When you launched this study, and I guess we're going back to the 1980s now, when you launched the study, what was the advice that women typically got regarding mammograms?
Well, at that time, mammograms were not part of standard screening approaches to cancer. In fact, there had been a national and then an Ontario committee that had evaluated whether or not they should be as a result of emerging information, particularly from the United States. But it had been decided that a program should not be introduced. And that was one of the major reasons we planned and eventually initiated the study.
And the age at which women were recommended to get mammograms 30 years ago was what?
Well, there was no age recommendation. There was no recommendation. But at the time we planned our study, there was information from a study in New York which suggested that mammography reduced deaths from breast cancer in women over the age of 50. But at the time we started, no evidence to suggest it was beneficial in women under the age of 50. But there was increasing evidence that mammography could detect cancers in women under the age of 50, and therefore we felt we should include a group age 40 to 49 in our study.
And has that changed today in terms of the recommended age at which a mammogram should be obtained?
There's some controversy over this. In Ontario, the standard recommendation is 50 or more, but it is possible for women under the age of 50 to get mammography. We are always talking here, incidentally, about women at normal risk. Women at ultra-high risk, there are other approaches advocated.
Of course. Okay, Dr. Kopans, thanks for your patience here. You know of the study. Let's just get your initial reaction to it, please.
Well, Steve, first of all, thank you for having me on. And I would like to make the point that this is not American radiologists attacking Canadians. The Canadian Association of Radiologists has issued a statement agreeing completely with the fact that the Canadian National Breast Screening Study was unfortunately compromised and that its data should not be used to guide recommendations for women. So that's not just the U.S. saying this. This is Canadian radiologists.
Let me just jump in there if I can, Dr. Kopans, because I actually have
Sure.
the Canadian organization's release here in front of me, saying that they too have concerns that the report is, quote, incredibly misleading analysis based on the deeply flawed and widely discredited Canadian National Breast Screening Study. The results of this BMJ study and other resulting from the CNBSS trial should not be used to create breast cancer screening policy. So we'll just get that on the record, and Dr. Miller, I'll give you a chance to speak to that in a second, but let's continue to get Dr. Kopans' position on what we've been talking about. Go ahead.
So, Steve, the vast majority of data from around the world clearly show that screening beginning at the age of 40 saves the most lives, and it's been shown in multiple randomized controlled trials. The Canadian study, unfortunately, is an outlier. And we can talk about why there were problems with the Canadian study if you'd like. I'm happy to go into the details. But the bottom line for women around the world, but certainly in the US and Canada, is that mammography screening beginning at the age of 40 is the best way to save the most lives. That's been shown repeatedly, and the reason that we're concerned about the publicity that the CNBSS has recently gotten is that the study, unfortunately, and I don't think this was intentional, had major problems with the way it was performed, and actually used poor quality mammography. I was invited up in the 1990s because of concerns about the quality of the mammography. I was one of the reviewers asked by Professor Miller and his associate Dr. Baines to review the mammograms with two other radiologists, and we confirmed that the quality of the mammography for much, if not most of the trial was poor to unacceptable. The reference physicist, Professor Martin Yaffe at Sunnybrook, has reaffirmed his statement back in the 1990s that the quality of the mammography in the CNBSS was actually below what was being practiced in the community in Canada at the time. So there were major problems with the mammography. On top of that, when you do these trials, they're called randomized controlled trials. The fundamental requirement is that you take a large number of women, we're talking about tens of thousands, and you randomly divide them into two groups. The principle is that if the division is truly random, you should have perfectly identical groups. And as gruesome as it sounds, you'd have the same number of women developing breast cancer over the period of time and the same number of women dying in both groups if nothing else was done. And then, as in the Canadian study, one group was offered annual mammography and a clinical breast exam, and the other group, this is for women in their 40s, which is the most important group that we're, I think, going to talk about. The other group just had a single clinical breast examination. Now, the random allocation is absolutely critical because without it, you can bias the study either for mammography or against mammography. Now, what was unfortunately done was that all the women had a clinical breast examination before they were assigned to be in one group, the mammography group, or in the other group that didn't get mammography.
And you think that compromises the test?
No. Well, that's a major violation of randomized controlled trials. Well, let me just finish, and then, Tony, you can answer. You're supposed to allocate women without knowing anything about them. All the other randomized controlled trials that have been done first randomly divided women and then invited them to be screened. So, number one, the clinical examination was done. They knew, the women the examiners, they were nurses and doctors who did the examination, wrote down whether a woman had a lump in her breast, many of which were cancer, and whether they had lumps in their underarms, which would indicate advanced cancer, cancer in the lymph nodes in the underarm. That was then given to the coordinators. Now, this has been documented. This isn't me making
Okay, let me jump in here if I can, Dr. Kopans. I don't want the clock to get away from us here before, because I take your two...
Can I just explain why that's important?
Okay, very briefly if you would.
Then they could, I'm going to. So then the women were allocated to be in the mammography group or the control group on open lists. So the people doing the allocation innocently could have skipped a line to make sure that women with advanced breast cancers got placed at higher numbers in the screening group, the mammography group, and that's indeed what happened.
Okay, I want to give Dr. Miller a chance to speak to these two issues. Number one, the quality of the mammography involved, and number two, the allocation, as Dr. Kopans just described it.
Okay. The statement of the Canadian Association of Radiologists is disappointing because we collaborated with them in setting up the study. We worked very hard with radiologists. We had an expert radiologist from the United States come up and advise us, and we carried out the films in accordance with the procedures approved by the Canadian Association of Radiologists. The quality of mammography, in fact, has been documented by other groups as being excellent, as at the time. It was a great deal of work was done, including by Dr. Yaffe, to make sure this was so. And
so if that's true, why is Dr. Yaffe saying 20 years ago that he was concerned about this?
I find it disappointing that he should say this. He obviously believes in screening, and I am sorry that he should change his view. In terms of the randomization, as Dr. Kopans knows, when he made his accusations, there was an investigation carried out by the National Cancer Institute of Canada and the University of Toronto. This is because he accused me of scientific misconduct in doing what he's just accused me on the just now. And we didn't do it that way. The nurses had no role in the randomization. We have documented equal numbers of women referred for abnormalities found by the nurses to the breast review clinics staffed by the study surgeons in the mammography group and in the clinical examination group and then the control group. So we have these data. They're published. They're available for Dr. Kopans to see. He ignores them.
So you're saying his claim that you've messed with this is just simply false?
It's false.
Dr. Kopans?
Well, that's just, I'm sorry, I like Tony, and I've never accused Tony of misconduct.
You did.
I think this was, I've never accused you, Tony, of misconduct. I've accused the trial of being biased, and I think, this review that Professor Miller just cited, I wrote to the reviewers before they went up to Canada that it was critical that they interview the coordinators who did the allocation, because they're the only ones who can tell whether they skipped a line or not. And they were not permitted to talk to the reviewers. Again, this is all documented. And for Professor Miller to say that the quality of the mammography was documented to be excellent, there's no documentation of that whatsoever in any of the written material, including the material that he's an author on. Professor Yaffe has never changed his mind. His original quote in the 1990s about the poor quality of the mammography was in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute. I think it was in 1993, or it was in the mid-1990s. He's never changed his mind. He never said the quality was very good. The quality has been documented to be poor. And Tyrone, who is at the National Cancer Institute, a biostatistician I don't even know, wrote a paper saying that, in fact, there was a statistically significant excess of advanced breast cancers allocated to the screening arm of the Canadian trial back at the time of allocation.
Okay, let's get a response from Dr. Miller.
Making these accusations.
Understood.
That's a misunderstanding by Tyrone. What happens when you screen with a more sensitive test is, in addition to finding early cases, you also find what later turns out to be fairly advanced cases. You bring forward the time of diagnosis of both. He accused us of this. By the time this paper was published, we showed equal numbers in both arms. So it was just the bringing forward, what we call lead time. So that, and this business of the review, unfortunately what had happened in the review of mammograms, we had agreed upon a protocol. Then when the reviewers came, I was actually on an international trip and I wasn't here. Kopans, another radiologist in the US and the Canadian, they changed the protocol to judge the mammograms by what was called state-of-the-art views at the time the review was done. But we started the trial with state-of-the-art views as they were in North America in 1980. Then we changed them. So that's why they were able to say, as they judged them by different criteria, that these early mammograms were not performed well.
Let me try this. So. Dr. Kopans, let me read this from the New England Journal of Medicine from November of 2012 and get you to comment on this. They wrote back then, in 2008, the number of women 40 years of age or older with overdiagnosed cancers was more than 70,000 per year, according to the best guess estimate, and more than 50,000 per year, according to the very extreme estimate. The corresponding estimates of the proportions of cancer that were overdiagnosed are 31% and 22%. So it would appear that these numbers, as reported in the New England Journal of Medicine, support Dr. Miller's findings in his study. So are the deficiencies that you say exist really all that problematic at the end of the day?
Well, the paper in the New England Journal of Medicine was based on what are called registry numbers. They weren't based on individual patients. And in fact, they have been shown to be incorrect. Multiple studies around the world have looked at the question of overdiagnosis, and they have shown that there is at most 10% of cases are overdiagnosed, and it's probably less than 1%. The New England Journal of Medicine was based, as you just read, on guesses. It's incredible to me, because the New England Journal of Medicine is my medical school's journal, that they would publish a paper based on guesses. If there was 70,000 cases of breast cancer in the United States in 2008 that would have disappeared if they hadn't been found, why is there not a single credible case in the literature of a breast cancer disappearing on its own? It's never happened. It doesn't happen. The overdiagnosis is made up. The reason there was overdiagnosis in the CNBSS is if you load the sides, not intentionally, but unintentionally load the sides with more cancers in the screening group, then you're going to have more cancers in the screening group. And just to press this point, Professor Miller, back in the 1990s, was quoted in multiple newspaper articles as saying that they had more deaths in the screened women in their 40s in the Canadian study than in the control group. And he was actually claiming that mammography was squeezing cancer cells into the blood, leading to early deaths. That's never happened in any other screening trial. Mammography does not squeeze cancer cells into the blood, and he retracted his statement subsequently.
I've got just a few minutes left
let
here.
Me just,
Forgive me.
That's why there were more cancers in the screen group.
I hear you. With a few minutes left here, do you want to speak to that very briefly, and then I want to put one more thing on the table?
The issue that there were more deaths earlier, we did document that. We were concerned about it, and we had a special review of treatment. That excess later disappeared. So it turned out that mammography did bring forward the time of diagnosis of cancers that were fairly late in their natural history, and that then this went on to kill them earlier than if they had not had the mammograms. I think that's something which has been seen actually in other trials, and there was a paper when the NCI, US National Cancer Institute, had a review from a scientist in New Zealand which documented that.
Okay. Dr. Kopans, you're not going to like this question, but you know I got to ask it anyway. And that is that the results of this study could dissuade women from having mammograms if they see all of these so-called false positives or overdiagnoses that are coming forward. And that obviously would hit radiologists in the pocketbook. And I need to ask you whether or not the profit motive here, how you get out from under the impression that your pecuniary interest in this issue is at play behind your criticism.
Yeah, I can only tell you that mammography is probably the biggest money loser for radiologists, certainly in the US. I don't know how it is in Canada. For many years, I think now it's finally put breast imaging groups into the black. But for years, we had to convince radiologists to do mammography because it was losing money. Now, your audience isn't going to believe that, and they're also going to say, well, it's the big companies that want to make a lot of money selling mammography equipment. The two largest companies are General Electric and Siemens, and they make no money from mammography. General Electric makes it from jet engines and probably their capital group or whatever. I can't convince your listeners or your audience that there's no profit motive. I can only tell you that there's no profit motive. And don't forget, Professor Miller spent I think it was 18 million, Tony, you'll correct me, 18 million Canadian dollars on the National Breast Screening Study of Canada. And I think it would be very hard to say that money was spent and we made a mistake and the trial is compromised and has no value. It would be very hard to admit that, and I appreciate that. All I can say is that mammography screening doesn't make anyone rich, and we do it primarily because the data clearly show that you save lives. In the US, the death rate from breast cancer had been unchanged till the mid-1980s when mammography screening began. And then soon after screening began, as you'd expect, the death rate began to decline. It's now down over 30%. The people who are arguing against mammography screening don't take care of women with breast cancer.
Okay, I've got a minute left here.
The people who take care of women with breast cancer all support screening.
Understood. Dr. Miller, got a minute left here, and you've heard the counter side of the allegation, which is you've got a financial interest in your position now, given the millions that were spent on this study.
Well, millions were spent on the study, far less than they would have been spent if it had been done in the US. Incidentally, I did treat patients with breast cancer, and also, so I know something about women with advanced breast cancer. Also, I would defend my friend Gilbert Welch from Dartmouth. He didn't make guesses in his estimate of overdiagnosis. It were very careful calculations. Kopans insists our study was wrong. It was in fact the only study designed to find out how much mammography adds to very good breast examinations in women aged 50 to 59. And the answer is it doesn't. And that is very important because it puts the onus back on women and their physicians to ensure early diagnosis occurs as soon as a woman is suspicious of a problem in her breast.
And Dr. Kopans, I'll give you the last word in the last 30 seconds on that.
Well, the last word is this is not just Dr. Kopans challenging the National Breast Screening Study of Canada. It's the Canadian Association of Radiologists. It's the American group of radiologists, and it's medical oncologists around the countries. No medical oncology group has come out and said, oh, don't worry, therapy will save lives. You don't have to do mammography screening. And it's only a small group of individuals. And I didn't know Dr. Miller was an MD taking care of women. I apologize. I'm surprised he's taking care of women because I don't think he's done that in many, many years. The point is mammography screening has been proven in multiple studies to reduce the death rate from breast cancer. Therapy is improved, but therapy saves lives when you treat breast cancer early.
Gentlemen, that's got to be the last word. Tough issue to be sure, but I thank both of you for coming on TVO tonight and sharing your views with us about it. Daniel Kopans from Mass General in Boston and Anthony Miller from the Canadian National Breast Screening Study. My thanks to you both.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.